On this episode of Mighty Car Mods, I'm continuing work on the rusty MR2. Had a bit of a battle even to get it to this stage where exhaust is off, dump is off, intake's off, intercooler pipes are gone. But that turbo has to come off because the studs in the head, at least one of them is stripped, which really sucks because it was just a matter of now bolting that back in and putting everything back together. But no, the MR2 is biting us once again. So the next thing we're going to do is start pulling that off. I've also got some other things to modify the car with. Yes, modify, not just repair. We're going to put a big fuel pump in it and some injectors and some coils to bring all that up to 30-year newer technology. So come with me on this adventure of MR2. Don't buy one. Buy one if you really want to. This mighty screw was holding this entire arrangement on, which is a pretty cool heat shield. We might reuse it, maybe. We're not reusing the screw though. This here is an airflow meter, very popular on all cars of this era, early stuff that had ECUs. What's interesting about it is, instead of having a hot wire, it's literally got a vane in there that flaps depending on how much air's going through. Super old school, like that's like, sort of. And the newer ones have like a hot wire and it knows based on how much that wire is cooled down, the volume of the air that's going through it, or the mass, or whatever the nerds want to say. But this has been repaired with some tar stuff, and luckily, because we're going to go new ECU, it's going in the bin. That's one of the reasons it takes this whole thing out of the equation. A 30-year-old device for measuring air can just go in the bin, and we'll do it with a temp sensor and our revs, and do it a much newer, much nicer way. Bin. So we've got an intake restrictor that we didn't realise was there. It seems that there's a piece of PVC pipe in here, which is all well and good. Normally I'm all for that kind of stuff, except that in this case it's blocking the intake. It's actually blocking it because it's been squashed. Obviously there's no... That's doing wonders for our intake air. This car, man. This car. It's just off the chain.
The air filter also has a questionable plastic object inside it, and the whole intake is full of black oily residue. It all needs to come out so the turbo can be removed. Access is challenging as the turbo sits hard up against the firewall. Getting tools in to undo the seized up nuts is also very tricky. The fight I had with the dump pipe last episode ended with it falling out onto the floor, and that's where it's remained ever since, in exile. With the oil feed and oil drain unbolted from the back of the engine, with a bit of leverage the whole assembly can come out.
Yes! I don't even have the energy to be excited about it, but it's out. It's really heavy, and I'm by myself, except for my friend there who's holding the camera for me. Help. Can you help? Thanks, man. Just turn it off for a sec. Now that the manifold and turbo are off, the back of the front of the engine is easy to see, and it's still pretty grubby down there. There's lots of dirt and rust and just yuck stuff. There's also this thing, which I think is commonly known as the hose from hell, and you can understand why, because manifold and turbo have to come off to fix it. Total pain. I did a bit of research before we got into this mess and bought one because I understood that's like the worst thing on the whole car to do. So I'm going to replace that, then I'm going to start tidying up, then I'm going to address this stud that has cross-threaded in the head, and hopefully once that is fixed, we're well on our way to modifying. Start modifying. That's what it's all about. The reason for pulling all this off is the fact that one of the studs will not grip into the head at all. I can just pull it in and out like that. So we need to repair that either with a helicoil or a different size bolt. I've got some new studs as well, so I'm going to replace everything I can get to. One or two of them don't feel like they want to move, and I don't want to fight with them too much because it could potentially mean head off or engine out, and that's just a pain. They're actually okay as they are. I'll replace everything that I can get to, fix this one, and then the turbo stuff can go back on.
Re-drilling a stud or a bolt hole in an engine is not for the faint-hearted. If you drill too deep, you could hit a coolant or oil gallery and you only get one shot at it. The hole is drilled out, it's tapped a size bigger, then the insert is wound in, which allows you to use the same size stud as all the others.
I've had my first win, the head has been successfully repaired, so now the manifold and turbo and all that stuff can go back on. The only thing is I don't have a new gasket, the old one's too trash to reuse, so I won't get that today. I'm going to change gears and do some other stuff like remove the side mount intercooler and a few other bits and pieces, but the car is no longer fighting back quite as hard as it was. I'm winning it over, slowly. Oh, there's a note. The note, oh, in English. It says, thick tights, genie pants, brown boots.
Upgrading the fuel pump requires removing the fuel tank, which requires pulling the dash to bits. I'm going to drain out the fuel so it's lighter and easier to work with. The drain bung makes it really easy to remove the fuel, and it comes out in a perfect stream. Yeah, nah, it doesn't.
Pretty much worse. Just when you think working on MR2s couldn't get any more awesome, you can drain the tank. Now apparently only the early MR2s had these drain bungs. So maybe they're doing people a favour for the later models by saying, don't do it that way. Figure out another way, pump it out. Anyway, it's empty, which is great. So now it won't weigh 80 kilos. Everything else has to come out of the way, and we have a nice clean floor. You might have noticed that that's not normal WD-40. It's like specifically made as a penetrant, so it's like more penetrant, less gate squeak. Handy for stuff like this. This is exactly what it's for. And just to sort of even up the score a bit on how hard it is to get some of these fasteners out when they are so corroded. Shout out again to all my friends in countries that salt or snow, because you're dealing with this all the time. I don't know how you're still doing it. Tank's out. Wow. I'm starting to feel like maybe this car got flood damaged or something. Like, I've never seen anything like it. There's so much corrosion. I mean, not just this, like the underside of the car to begin with, but that is next level. There's like this stuff growing on it, barnacles and things. I'm really glad I pulled it out because there's no filter. The tank inside doesn't look as bad. It's like this is the sacrificial bit that's just copped it all.
I was hoping to reuse the tank, as parts aren't all that easy to find for these cars as time goes on. After a few flushes though, it becomes clear that this one is useless.
Progress has been made. It's now pretty much stripped, so there's no more surprises in there. We can see everything. I can clean up some of the rust that's under there, although it's fairly minimal. And now order in some parts. So next time I see you, bright, shiny new fuel system, hopefully.
I bought this tank along with a few other parts from MR2 wreckers in Victoria, and it came complete with everything but the fuel level sender. I'll be able to recycle my old one easily enough, as my gauge does work fine. It just needs a clean up and it can be moved across. Then all I need to do is install my upgrade fuel pump into this good tank and stick the tank back in the car.
So this is the pump that came out of my MR2. As you can see, it's either spent some time underwater or it's been sitting for a very, very long time. This is what a pump's supposed to look like. Shiny, and a filter basket that actually works. So this is great that the new tank came with one of these because I don't have to spend heaps of time cleaning up the old one. So I'm just going to replace this pump with a higher flow one, smack it on that little bracket and put it back in the tank, and then put the tank back in the car.
The factory fitted fuel pump is perfectly fine for stock power levels and to get the car through the warranty period and beyond. They are moving parts, so they do wear out, so it can be good insurance to make sure your pump is fresh and your filter and lines clean. None of which applies to this car. It's in desperate need of a new setup.
To keep costs down, I'm recycling an old fuel pump. This one says X Evo 9 on E85 made 270 kilowatts using this pump. I've never owned an Evo 9, so that's kind of weird. But this will go in because I've got all the plugs and adapters to make it work. A new filter basket should sit in there. It's a fairly common upgrade and it's a lot more modern.
The pump isn't specifically made for MR2s, but as long as the filter sock is in the right position and is powered with the correct polarity, it will work just fine. A fuel injection pump like this will run 10 to 15 times more pressure than it would if it was supplying a carburetor. Instead of a vacuum sucking the fuel into the cylinder in the engine, we're squirting it in like a fire hose.
All right, I'm going to attempt to get this fuel tank back into the car. I know this is going to suck, so we're going to have one of those awesome shots where it's just in there magic. No, you can come with us. You can just enjoy it as much as I'm about to not enjoy it. Weirdest shaped fuel tank I've ever seen. Very, very odd. I went in the wrong way. See, straight up. Failed before we even started. It's nice and clean, this tank. Really nice and clean. Awesome. Those have to go up in there first. Why, Toyota? Why? I mean, I know why, because you've built a mid-engine car, so. Oops, broken it. Fall out again. Sucks so bad. It's in. I'm going home. Someone in the factory at Toyota had to do this job and had to do it 35 times a day or more. Like, they must have had a sense of humour, seriously. They must have been the life of the party, saying, check me out, I can do anything. Because I can put fuel tanks in MR2s. Unbelievable. Nope. Everything is breaking. once I put my hand in this rag and started scrubbing that I realised I'm using somebody's underpants, and they're definitely not mine. Extra large Hugo Boss. Committed now. There's nothing surviving this stuff.
I'm using rust converter and primer that will prevent the rust getting any worse. Luckily, on the body of the car, it's just surface rust, which can be brushed off. Anything more serious is in parts that can and will be replaced later on.
That's why you change your fuel filter regularly, people. All that dirt is from inside the filter.
The fuel filter uses high-pressure rubber lines attached with banjo bolts, which have sat for so long it's full of dirt and scale. The banjo bolts can be cleaned up, and the replacement filter comes with new copper washers which are installed onto them.
Fuel tank is in. I got some mad new bolts. Check this out. These are all the bolts from Yaris Hilton. Another dirty black Toyota. So I'm going to recycle them to the MR2, because unlike the bolts on the MR2, they're not totally seized and corroded and falling to bits. I also bought a black hose kit to suit SW20 MR2, and this is what arrived, and I said, can I have a black one? They said, no, we don't have any black ones left, so you got a red one. Thanks. I got $5 refund. So I'm going to get rid of some of these old rubber hoses that are a bit perished, and I'm going to get rid of the old crusty clamps. Got some new clamps to go on, so I'm going to install that, and we're getting close to what I don't know. I bet it's the wrong hose kit. I would bet money that that is not actually a hose kit for an MR2. Has to be. What other car would have this many bloody hoses? How good does that look? My radiator hoses are in. My red radiator hoses actually worked out pretty well. They give you a bit more length and you can then trim it off if you need to make it fit perfectly. Pipes are in, tank is in, handbrake's in, although the handbrake is not perfect. This side's really flappy. It's actually come away from the caliper up there, so I'm going to have to replace it, which is annoying, but that I can't do anything about that at the moment. Everything else is back in. I'm now waiting on a turbo, and before I can do anything else, I need to have the turbo in there. So next time on Marty Car Mods, when my turbo arrives, we're going to finish this thing. Thanks for watching.